Hello everybody! This is Dr. Meyer here with a video for you on notation and writing a manuscript, a topic that you might already know a lot about. However, if you don't have a notation software like Sibelius or Finale or some of the free online notation softwares, you may have to write music by hand, like maybe in your assignments in music theory class. So just in case you're not a master music editor, I want to go over a few common errors and guidelines to help you avoid mistakes in your written manuscripts. Let's get started. The first error commonly made is not placing the clef properly on the staff. A clef is of utmost importance, as we would never know which notes belong on which line or space without one. That said, you must always designate a clef at the beginning of every line or system of music. Let's get started with the treble clef, or G clef. This designation is important to know to properly write the clef on the staff. That is, the little swirl in the middle of the clef designates which line is to be read as G. In our conception of treble clef, the second line from the bottom is read as G, so your notations should reflect that as well. While the other elements of the treble clef can be left up to artistic interpretation, the swirl in the middle must circle the second line from the bottom to be a true treble clef. Another clef often used is the bass clef, or the F clef. Just like the G clef, a certain element of the clef sign designates the F line. The two dots on the right-hand side of the bass clef surrounding the second line from the top should be read as F. Again, you may interpret the hook portion of the clef artistically, but the two dots must surround the line to be read as F. The last most commonly used clef is a movable clef that designates the C line on the staff. The center of the C clef, which looks kind of like a number 3, designates the line on which we read the note C. The most common placement for these clefs are on the center line and the second from the top, and they are called the alto and tenor clefs respectively. The C clef is found on every line of the staff, but you will mostly encounter the alto clef and tenor clef in your assignments, or if you play the viola or other stringed instruments that use these clefs. One mistake that people often make is the placement of note heads on the staff. Your note head should be a somewhat oblong oval and be centered on the line or space where you intend to place the note. A note head which is too small is difficult to read, and a note head which is too big is ambiguous in terms of the note you are intending. As pictured, the note heads for the G are centered on the G line, but don't take up too much space so as to be ambiguous. The whole note, A, here fills the entire space of the A space, but does not go outside of the space. One semi-unrelated note here. The dotted note dot, which is placed behind the note head here, will always reside in a space. So make sure that if your note head is on a line, that the dot is in the space above that note here as indicated on this G. Accidentals have a very specific placement on the staff in order to be read correctly. First, accidentals always come before the note head. If you place the accidental behind the note, you'll be making a notation mistake. Second, each symbol has a little window in which you will put on the line or space of the note name to be altered by the accidental. See the window here inside of the natural, sharp, and flat signs. Compare these to the symbols on the staff above to verify that each is written correctly. Also note that these symbols are sized appropriately, that is, not too big or not too small, but clearly notated to indicate a change to the written pitch. Some musicians are unsure which direction to put the stem of a note on the staff. Thankfully, there are a few easy rules to remember the direction. If the note head is above the center line of the staff, the stem goes down. If the note head is below the center line, the stem will point up. As for note heads on the center line of the staff, they almost always will go down, except for when the surrounding stems are also pointing up. So you'll sort of keep everyone pointing the same direction, as in the last measure of this example here. These stem rules will be altered when we are writing in 4-part harmony, so each voice has a specific stem direction in 4-part harmony, so make sure that you are making a note that these rules are for single-line melodies only. As for how long to draw your stem, the stem length should only be 1 octave in length. That is, if your note is C on the second line from the top of the staff, just like the first note in our example, you should draw your stem down to where middle C would be located in the staff, that being 1 octave in length. Now that you know about where to place note heads, their accidentals, and their stems, let's talk a little bit about spacing. Spacing is important to make your manuscript legible for your reader. Spacing doesn't just apply to individual measures, but for groups of measures and systems, and even whole pages if your piece ends up being that long. In the above example, the notes on the top line are too far apart, and in the bottom line, they're too close together. So these 2 lines are a little too difficult to read and will make your manuscript look messy. A better solution are evenly spaced notes, which are based on the length of each rhythm. For example, the half note takes up the most space in this measure because it's the longest in duration. The 16th notes are closer together because they're shorter. This line is much easier to read than the other 2 and will make a neater manuscript. Now, it will take some time to practice writing the spacing of your note heads, so don't get discouraged if your manuscript doesn't turn out perfectly the first few times that you are writing. Beaming is a topic which could have its own video, but we'll discuss it briefly here. Notes must be beamed according to the meter in order to show each beat or occasionally group of strong and weak beats. In simple meter, beats are divided into 2 subdivisions. So in 3/4 time, you can only beam 2 eighth notes together or 4 16th notes together. In the above example, observe how the right beaming shows each of the 3 beats clearly, 1, 2, 3, and the wrong beaming obscures beats 2 and 3 with incorrect beaming. As a player, it's much easier to read the right side of this example. Similarly, in compound meter, the beat is subdivided into 3 pulses. So you may beam 3 note heads together, unlike in simple meter. Make sure that each of the beats are clearly notated with your beaming. In this example, each of the beats are clearly legible with the current beaming. You may feel tempted to beam together the 2 eighth notes here, but they are part of 2 different beats and must be flagged separately in order to notate the meter clearly. Lastly, here are a couple of general musical manuscript items to check before you submit your work. Make sure your time signature is written properly, with the correct numbers on the top and the correct numbers on the bottom. As well as your key signatures, these must be on the proper lines and spaces in each clef. Musical symbols convey a lot of information, but if they are written improperly, you or your reader may not be able to successfully perform your music. These include dynamic markings, accent or other articulation markings, tempos, slurs, ties, etc. The list goes on. The more you read and learn, the more familiar you will become with the convention of all musical markings, so don't get overwhelmed. Lastly, for handwritten and computer-generated manuscripts, I highly recommend that you triple check your spacing of your systems and pages so there are no extra or empty measures hanging out at the end of the system or the page. As I grade assignments, I will take off points for poor manuscript care. On this point specifically, but on these others as well. Now it's your turn to practice. There are 5 notation errors in this example. Pause the video now if you need more time to find all the errors. Here are the errors you should have found for this example. The treble clef is not centered around the second line from the bottom to indicate G in its proper spot, so it needs to be shifted down a little bit. The time signature is upside down. The 6 should be on the top and the 8 should be on the bottom, not 8, 6. That's not even a time signature. The sharp sign here in front of the B is 1 space too low. It needs to be moved up onto the line right in the window to create B sharp. The second measure here, this G, the stem of the note falls below the center line, so it should be pointed up instead of down. Lastly, the fermata sign at the end is upside down. If the sign were below the staff, it would look like this, but it is above, so it needs to have the dot on the bottom of the symbol. Here's what we learned in this video. We learned that there are several manuscript errors that could be made when writing our own music. Here's what we need to look out for. The clefs must be placed on the correct line in order to indicate the right pitches for each clef. Note heads should be sized properly and placed on the correct line or space in a small slanted oval. Accidentals must be placed before the note head and on the corresponding line or space of the note to be altered. Stems have a specific pointing direction depending on the location of the note head. Up for below the middle line and down for above the middle line. Pay careful attention to the spacing of notes and measures within your manuscript for ease of reading and playing. Beaming of note stems must reflect the meter, whether simple or compound. A few other items which need careful consideration are key signatures, time signatures, and other musical symbols such as the fermata that was upside down in our example. That's all for now. Good luck writing your own clean and properly notated musical manuscripts. I look forward to seeing them. Thanks for watching.